stay in the Big Ten for this one. It's from Warner. Dear Andy and Ari, first time writing in, listen to you guys every day and appreciate what you do. I am an Oregon fan, and I was curious about two things. One, how should last season be remembered? 13-0 and winning the Big Ten are huge accomplishments, but what long-term takeaway should the Rose Bowl drubbing have? Does it mean that Oregon is far away from the upper echelons of the sport, or was it simply ran into the wrong team at the wrong time? Oregon proved it can hang with elite teams like Penn State and Ohio State within the season, which simply makes the result more confusing to me. Two, going forward, what is Oregon's ceiling? I recognize both you and Ari are high on Dan Lanning, and the talent brought in year over year is encouraging, but I push back at the notion that it's simply luxury shopping in the portal. At key positions such as defensive tackle, Bear Alexander, Derek Harmon, and Jamari Caldwell, left and right tackle, Alex Harkey, Isaiah World, and Johnny Cornelius, and at quarterback, Bo Nix, Dillon Gabriel, and Dante Moore, the Ducks have relied on the transfer portal to fill these needs. Is this talent acquisition model sustainable, and ultimately, how does that affect long-term ceiling? Really thoughtful questions from Warner. Do you want let's tackle the first one first about how to remember last season? Because I think you wrote a column coming out of the Rose Bowl that I thought summed it up really well.
Yeah, from Pasadena. And I think that the actual reality of how this season should be remembered, Andy, is with great pride. I think that this past season ended in a very bad way for you, Oregon fans, but I also think, too, that this season was the line in the sand in which Oregon kind of makes that transition from second tier to top tier. I don't know if you take that away, but that's what I take away. And the other thing is, and I've shared this opinion on the show quite a bit over the last 6 months, but my opinion is that the way that Ohio State was constructed and what they possessed on their roster last year is the last of a dying breed, and that Oregon, which, ironically, as you mentioned in your question, beat them earlier in the season, ran into them when they were angry, when they were hungry, when they were hurt. And, a team, can go two ways in that realm. And that's, give up and suck, or come together and try really, really hard to be great. And they ended up doing the latter. And Oregon, with a week off and, a tougher route in the playoff because of dysfunctional seating and all those stuff, just ran into the wrong place at the wrong time. Like, I think Oregon is going to be very good this year. I think that they will be a team that I conceivably believe could win a national title as soon as this year, if things come together for them. And I don't think there's a team in college football that will hold as stark of a talent advantage as Ohio State ended up having at the end of that year. And people will say, well, they beat them once, the talent advantage. And you're right, they did. Regular season games, especially ones on the road, can go out a little bit differently, where my personal belief is that when teams play in neutral sites and postseason games, it's a different environment. Like, teams are different in that environment, especially in a playoff environment. And I wouldn't be too like, oh, we're screwed or we're second tier as a result of that. I think we would have to acknowledge what they lost to. The second part of the question, I think, is really interesting in that, like, they have had to, get important players at key positions in the portal. But I don't believe that Oregon, from a high school recruiting situation, is in a position where they're ever going to feel like they're not recruiting up to snuff. And my two things are always, are you recruiting high schools well enough, which Oregon is unequivocally doing? And two, have you proven in the portal that if there is a need or a position of great value that you want, can you close? And Oregon has proven that. So when you look at their ceiling into the future, as the top tier teams like Ohio State, who have geographical advantages and historical advantages, come down to closer to here, and Oregon comes up to here, they're going to be on a more even playing field, both because Dan Lanning is a elite level talent evaluator and accumulator, and because he doesn't have to do it at the rate that he saw firsthand at Georgia anymore, because that doesn't exist. Fair. And that's how you debate. Like, I felt like I was like in the old school, like, debate scene.
I just blacked out for a second.
Like that, like Ace Ventura, when he gets there. And that's what I just did. But I feel like I did a good job. Andy, anything to add?
No, I think that was a great job. And I will expand on your answer to the first part. I think what Oregon did in the regular season last year was extraordinary. And I don't know if we're going to see anybody do that again for a while. I mean, maybe we're going to see a team in the Big Ten as currently constructed, or the SEC is currently constructed, go undefeated, go 13-0, win the conference championship. I don't think that's going to be very easy for anybody to do. I think what they did was pretty extraordinary. And so take pride in that. What happened in the playoff, you did run into a version of a team that you're probably not going to run into again in that situation. So I think if you can put together a team like Oregon had last year, going forward, they're not going to. Now, they might play a team they could lose to in the quarterfinals or the semifinals of the playoff, but that doesn't mean it would be like that. I think that team, that Ohio State team, is an anomaly.
The biggest difference is you will play teams you could lose to. You won't play teams that you cannot beat. And I think that's the distinction.
Right. And they were not going to beat them that day. Yeah.
Now, and the thing that I think will be interesting about how we review and look back at Ohio State's season from this past year is that they did lose to Oregon and they did lose to Michigan, and they were a 2-loss team in the regular season. And in previous iterations of the playoff, they would not have even made the postseason. But I think that they will be constantly shortchanged in the annals of history as a result of how good they were. Like, you will not, like, I think the Athletic ranked the best teams of the last, 20 years or whatever, like 1 through 50. And like, I think like the Ohio State team as it was constructed on the field in the national championship game and on the way to it would have been able to hold its own against 2020 Georgia and 2020 Alabama and 2019 Georgia and all those teams that were winning championships back then. They were constructed in a way this past year to compete with the superest of super teams from the 2014 to 21 era. And they will never be remembered that way because they didn't get it done in the regular season. And frankly, that's the way the sport probably should work, where you don't get to even go to the playoff. But Ohio State was able to be the beneficiary of the new season, the new rules, the new outline for how the playoff is champion is crowned and the playoff is fielded, and they took advantage of it. But there have been a lot of great teams in Ohio State history, specifically, that have not done enough in the regular season to get to the point where this Ohio State team got a chance to redeem itself. So, but Oregon, I think, is looking at it like, well, we beat them and they lost to Michigan. What the hell happened? It's like, when you really take a step back and look at who got drafted off that team and what they were every bit as good as the super team era teams that won national titles back then, in my opinion.
As for the transfer portal thing, it is interesting. We've had this discussion relating to Oregon and to Miami because I think both of those teams do a good job recruiting out of high school. And especially Miami does a really good job recruiting in the trenches, and obviously Oregon does too. But they are more than willing to go fill needs. I will push back on Dante Moore because I do realize he is a transfer. He went to UCLA first. But am I wrong for looking at him almost as an Oregon recruit because he was committed to Oregon for most of his recruitment? He then flips to UCLA, spends that year there, but it's Chip Kelly's last year there. It's really weird. And then he goes to Oregon and agrees. I mean, by going to Oregon, you knew he was agreeing to sit behind Dillon Gabriel for a year. Like, I view him more as an Oregon recruit than I do as a transfer.
I mean, I guess if you view Jared Verse as a Florida State recruit, you kind of have to view Dante Moore as an Oregon recruit, right? Like, it's kind of like the same deal. If you are somebody who transfers in and has multiple years to develop in a program and then comes out and does really well, I mean, I don't think people really connect Dante Moore to the UCLA recruiting class. And frankly speaking, you're not going to find a lot of people who played as much as Dante Moore did as a true freshman who are willing to go transfer to a place where he knows going into it he's not playing. Like, that's not something that you see very often. And I think as a result of that, it was a mature decision and one that might pay off great dividends because, I am in no way, shape, or form writing this kid's ability off. And I actually thought he showed some great flashes during his time at UCLA. You put him with these weapons. I mean, he's going to be thrown to Evan Stewart. There aren't a lot of people who are covering that guy.
Decorian Moore. Let's not forget,
Moore.
Talk about guys. We talked about true freshmen who blew up last year. This is a true freshman who blew up this year.
And everybody wanted more. So like that.
Yeah, everybody in the country.
So, yes, I wrote from Pasadena the day after Ohio State beat the crap out of them to hold your head high and be hopeful for the future. And I meant that. That's how I view it. And I think that their long-term ceiling is national championship. And I don't know that I would have said that in 2018. And I don't know if I would have said it in 14 when they went to the national title game. So
also the development part of it, because I've talked about this a bunch on the show. Like, I feel like how you develop players and what they are as a finished product when they leave you is a lot more telling than the input part of it. Josh Connerly was a guy that Dan Lanning recruited to Oregon out of high school. And he played left tackle at Oregon 3 years. He became a first-round draft pick. Let me ask you this. Is Derek Harmon a first-round draft pick if he just stays at Michigan State last year? Or did going to Oregon and getting coached by the staff at Oregon help make him a first-round draft pick? Because if you believe that did, and I do, then I don't think shopping in the portal at key positions is necessarily saying that you're not going to win a national title. I think that there will be times in every roster where there are holes and you got to fill them. And if you can fill them with guys who, even if they come for 1 year, you can make them a first rounder that 1 year. You're doing all right.
Too. How many teams have won the national championship in the last 5 years who had a quarterback who transferred in their career? And also, too, when you take Dante Moore, that is very, excuse me, tickle in my throat there. Very different than taking a 1-year rental. They took him as a recruit, any more than Julian Sands from Ohio State is an Alabama transfer.
Yeah, but I think Isaiah World this year is probably viewing this as a 1-year situation, and then he goes to the draft. I think that's fine as long as it's not your entire way of being, and I don't think it is for Oregon.
I think that quarterbacks are transient and they always transfer, and it's hard to keep somebody. But the thing that would make me most comfortable as an Oregon fan or any fan of any big time team is if my coach has shown and illustrated an ability to consistently sign elite level quarterback prospects to bring into the program for at least 1 year, because relying on the quarterback transfer situation can get you into hot trouble. And I kind of feel like Florida State is like, I hate that Florida State is constantly the antithesis of what goes well with the portal, and you use like examples of what goes wrong, but they found themselves in a position where they absolutely needed to have a quarterback. They went and got one who wasn't very good, and it tanked their entire season.
And it was a disaster.
And they didn't have anybody that they recruited out of high school that they could have felt really comfortable with stepping in there. And I think that like, to me, it's like if the Nico Iamaleava, I don't know, I can't say his name. Situation.
The first time's always hard. Iamaleava. You gotta say it a few times.
First time, Iamaleava. Quarterbacks are going to be leaving suddenly more now than ever before. So you need to have people on your roster that you're comfortable with. And like, I feel like getting that guy is harder.
And Austin Novosad stayed, by the way. Yeah. Austin Novosad, who is a very highly rated quarterback recruit, he stayed. He's still there. So he's an option too.
I legitimately think that doesn't count. I think that they took a luxury item at a position that wasn't a need when they took him, and now they have him. Like that's accumulation of talent. It might not have been from high school, but there should be a distinction between 1-year rental and program guys that are going to be on your team for multiple years moving forward. And I think
and I'll be honest, if Bear Alexander winds up a star this year, then Dan Lanning might be the greatest coach in the world, because based on what we've seen in his career, he's sort of a grass is greener guy. Like, you saw him shut it down at USC because he wasn't getting the playing time he wanted. Like, if Dan Lanning can turn that guy into a star, then yeah, he can probably do it with anybody.
The grass is pretty green in Oregon, so we'll see. It rains a lot there.
That's just that, but it never rains at Autzen Stadium.